Alright, in this video we're going to talk about section 1.4 day 1, trigonometric functions of any angle. So in the previous section we saw that the relationships between x and y coordinate on the unit circle and how to find the 6 trigonometric functions based on those. And that really only worked for our unit circle when our radius was 1. But since all of these functions are just ratios, we can adjust them to work for any xy point, not just those on the unit circle. So we're going to be able to use our trig functions that we've learned before in terms of x and y, except we're going to change them a little bit so they don't have to fit on the unit circle. So how we're going to do that is we're going to look at this stuff here. So theta is still going to be an angle in standard position, except now what we're going to say is r is going to be equal to the square root of x squared plus y squared. So really it's just the distance formula between some point x, y and the origin. So we're finding this r here, and we're really going to kind of think about that as the radius. So when we were talking about the unit circle, we said the sine was the y value. And the radius of the unit circle is 1, so really that could have been y over 1. But since we're not going to be on the unit circle, we're going to use any radius. We're just going to call this r. So sine is no longer just y, it's y divided by the radius. And again, on the unit circle, the radius is 1, so that's still just going to be y. Cosine is going to be x over r. Tangent and cotangent don't change, because if you had y over r divided by x over r, we would be multiplying by r over x. Your r's would cancel, and you're still going to have y over x. Same thing with cotangent. So those aren't going to change. And then secant, the relationship's still going to be the same. We're going to take our cosine, x over r, and we're going to find its reciprocal, r over x, which means cosecant is going to be r over y. So really, it's the same thing that we were doing before, except now we have an r that we're going to find with the square root of x squared plus y squared instead of using 1. So a couple quick examples. Let negative 3, 4 be a point on the terminal side of an angle in standard position. Find the sine, cosine, and tangent of that angle. So if we think negative 3, 4 is going to be like over here, to find r, the length of that segment, we're going to do the square root of negative 3 squared plus 4 squared, which is going to give us the square root of 9 plus 16, and that's the square root of 25, which is going to be 5. We're going to think about just the positive, the primary square root, because we're talking about a distance, can't have negative 5. So r is 5. So if we think about sine of theta, from our thing before is going to be y divided by r. So the y value is 4, so we're going to be at 4/5. The cosine value was our x value divided by r. So our x value is negative 3. Our r is 5, so negative 3/5. Tangent of theta is going to be equal to the y value divided by the x value. So that's going to be negative 4/3. So next example is going to look like this. Given that tangent of theta equals negative 5/4 and cosine is greater than 0, find sine and secant. So the first thing we need to think about is, where is this thing located? What's going to be positive? What's going to be negative? Because we know tangent's negative 5/4, but we don't know if the x or the y value is going to be positive until we think about this right here. Cosine's got to be bigger than 0. So remember that tangent of theta is y over x, and the cosine of theta is x over r. If that's got to be greater than 0, and we know that this tangent is negative, we know that sine has got to be the negative value. So when we think about tangent being negative 5/4, we can think of it as negative 5 over 4 instead of 5 over negative 4, because they're telling us the cosine value has to be positive. So we know that this is the y value, so y is negative 5. We know x is equal to 4, so we can find r is going to be the square root of 4 squared plus negative 5 squared. So r is the square root of 16 plus 25. So r is going to be equal to the square root of 41. So we know r, we know x, we know y. We're trying to find the sine value. So sine of theta is going to be y over r. So we're looking at negative 5 over radical 41, which is going to be negative 5 radical 41 over 41 after you rationalize your denominator. And they want secant. So secant is going to be equal to r over x. So our r value is radical 41. Our x value is positive 4. So radical 41 over 4 is going to be our secant value. So that's the two main questions that they can kind of ask you about trig functions of any angle. So we'll call it quits on that video, and we'll see you in the next one.